Oh, hi, everybody. My name is Nancy Moore. I'm the Director of Programs for Africa Fire Mission, and real excited to have you all here with us today. We have Jason Braun as our instructor talking about fire behavior today, and just really glad to have each of you with us. Please remember to use the chat to introduce yourselves or to ask questions along the way. We'll have some time for questions at the end. And also a short tea time afterwards, just for connecting with each other and all of that. But just grateful for each of you being here today. And I'm going to pass it to Jose for a few words of encouragement before we get started with training.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I truly appreciate for this awesome time. Jason, thank you for joining us today. Much appreciated. So today, the encouragement I had was just to continue reminding us about our behavior when we are on the fire ground. Yeah. And what I mean by that is, you remember when we were in school, when you're in fire school, we're being told freelancing is never allowed in the firehouse. So for me today, I would really encourage you to, when you're in the fire ground, even as we learn about fire behavior, be cautious also for your safety and also the safety of your colleagues by you first behaving well, making sure that you are having a buddy system, making sure that you do the right job, the assigned right job. If you're told to go get a tool, you should know what type of tool you're being asked. And also you should be familiar where that tool is located in the fire truck. So today is just an encouragement that you should never be a loner on the fire ground. Yes, you might be carried away by or being anxious with maybe how big the fire is, or maybe you feel a little bit courageous enough. But please never ever be alone. Always be with somebody, as we are told in the fire in the fire school. Always have your buddy with you. It is very important. Thank you very much. And we shall jump right into today's lesson. And I will invite Jason, Captain Jason Braun. The floor is yours, sir. Take it away.
All right, good morning. Thanks, Jose. Thanks, Nancy. I've been pretty lucky to do a couple of these presentations, and it's a great way to kind of remind, like what Jose said, of going back to some of the basic stuff of remembering the buddy system, remembering to have a partner as you're working there to be safe as you're doing that. And so it's a good opportunity to promote safety and promote more encouragement in the fire system of working with your partner. So thanks, Jose. Thanks, Nancy. Like Jose said, my name is Jason Braun. I'm a captain here at a fire department in Minnesota. I was at Africa Fire Mission with Kenya in 2019. This is how I started the involvement here. So I'm going to jump in. Today we're talking about fire behavior. Let me share my screen. Jose, I'm going to ask you that you can see my.
Yep.
You can see my screen here.
Yes, I can see your screen.
All right, I'm going to work through this way. I do have a couple videos, and I hope they work today. I'm going to work through that, but today the main thing is fire behavior and how that kind of relates to the firefighting job. We need to have a general idea of what the fire is going to do while we're fighting fire, or how we're protecting ourselves, or how we're looking at the fire from the outside perspective too. So main thing today, gain some new knowledge, because learning this stuff is going to help us, is what's going to help us stay alive. Here's where a lot of the information is coming from. So I'll give you a minute to write any of this stuff down. I'd highly recommend that if you've never been on before, the underwriters lab or the underwriters laboratories. They have some fantastic training that's free. So if you get a chance, check out UL. All you need to do is just show that you're a firefighter. You can log in. The training's fantastic. I think it would likely be very beneficial to firefighters at any level, honestly, too. So highly encourage you to check that out. The NIST, you're going to find some training on new technologies and how they relate to older standards as well. So there's a lot of really great information out there. The UL Fire Safety Research Institute Academy, that's what I was talking about for free training, and you'll learn a lot, and it can relate to really no matter where you're from. So why we're talking about it is, we have to work within different systems, and they need to match in how we're performed. So we have to understand how our PPE can protect us from the environment we're going into. If we're going into a fire that's hotter than what our PPE can protect us from, that puts us in danger. So we need to remember between that and how long our air pack can protect us. As we're working in a fire situation, our air pack may be a 30-minute air pack, and that doesn't mean we have 30 minutes of air that's going to provide us every time. We need to have we need to give ourselves an out. We need to give ourselves enough time to get out with the amount of air and with the amount of supplies that we have. So we need to understand what we want to have for an outcome, and that's going to be based on what we get when we get there. If we get there and we have a house like the one on the left, we know that this is for us here in Minnesota, this might be a standard house fire, but we understand that if we have a house fire like this, we're not trying to save a whole lot of the house. We need to put the fire out so it doesn't cause any further damage, other houses, other parts of the home if the doors are closed or however. So we need to understand what we're working with and what kind of outcome we can get from that. So our actions have to be tied to what that means. If we have a fire like the one on the left, we can't be searching the room that fire's in. There's no survivable victims. It's not that. So our actions are going to be that we're going to work on extinguishing the fire, and that's what we understand our outcome can be. So just getting into the basics a little bit on fire science. We know that fire needs a couple different things to work. The oxygen heat fuel triangle has turned into what they call the fire tetrahedron. Now it needs they call it chemical reaction as well, or the chain reaction between a few different things. We know that it's not just oxygen heat fuel that creates it, but sometimes there's chemical reaction as well. Well, it won't promote fire growth necessarily. We know that if we take a portion of either the fire triangle or fire tetrahedron away, we can make a difference on that fire scene. Fire can't grow, fire can't keep developing if we take the heat away by putting water in, if we take the fuel away by removing the fuel, or oxygen if we think about closing doors or closing windows. We have to understand as well that smoke is fuel. There's fuel in the smoke here. I'm hoping this video will work. But smoke is the product when of incomplete combustion. So as smoke's coming out, that smoke still has products in it that can still create the fire. This is a good example as you see this this candle here as it's burning. Blow it out, and that smoke still has fuel in it. That smoke still has unburned products. So they're going to, you'll see here shortly, they're going to light the smoke. So we didn't take, we did take part of that away, but we have to remember that we didn't take the entire thing away. We took some of the, we put the heat out, but that as soon as we reintroduced heat, there's still fuel there, and smoke is fuel in this case. And yeah, we do need to remember as well that fuels are going to burn differently based on the chemical reaction. On the left, there's wood, and on the right, we have styrofoam, really. So the unburnt fuel has to go somewhere. So if you look at the styrofoam is not going to burn as clean as the wood. So the styrofoam still has fuel remaining. We need to understand what type of fuel we're working with. If we're working with just wood, we can just take the heat away, and that's not gonna, there won't be any fuel remaining. However, if we're working with more of the synthetic products like polystyrene and styrofoam in this case, or is often used in insulation purposes or in different industries. All right, so as we're looking at the different types of fuel, we also need to look at how much fuel, or what difference the fuel makes. In the simplest term here, it's showing an example here of just a candle. The same size candle, it doesn't necessarily grow exponentially. This same size candle, if you put 10 of them in the room, you're just burning, you look at burning 10 times hotter. And if you look at common items that we do have, in Minnesota, we have a pretty common issue with Christmas trees, as people have Christmas trees that start to get dry toward the end of the season. Christmas trees burn very hot. So think about the different types of fuels you're getting into, and the different and they're going to burn at different rates. We don't necessarily need to know what the wattage burn is here, but as you know, and as you're listening to the radio or the incident command before you get there, knowing what's burning will help you understand what your desired outcomes or what your strategies are going to be. If we have a bed on fire compared to a trash can fire, we know that we have to protect ourselves differently, and we're going to have to give ourselves a different strategy to fight that fire. So fuel heat release rate, and a lot of that goes back, we're going back to that fire triangle again. So it's going to depend on the type of fuel and how dense that fuel is, where that fuel is in the room, and how much that fire can spread to that fuel, and then the ventilation profile, how much oxygen is in that room. So again, going back to that fire triangle of how much of each product we have. This is an example of straw in two different areas. One straw bale is compact, still in place. The other one has been released a little bit, so that oxygen can get in there very differently in the one on the left than the one on the right. So the one on the right will eventually burn all the way through, but the oxygen has to find its way through. That's because it's so dense. There's no oxygen flow in there. On the left side, there's a significant amount of room for that oxygen to flow. And again, going back, we go to that fire triangle, and we have the most balanced version of the fire triangle is going to burn the hottest and the quickest. Eventually, the one on the left is going to run out of fuel faster because of how fast it's burning. But the amount of heat that put off in a short period of time was far higher than the one on the right. The one on the right will eventually put off the same amount of heat overall, but it takes a lot longer to get there. I like this video to think of if you're going into a room that has a significant amount of stuff in there. If we go into a small room that somebody has a large amount of their personal belongings and that stacked very closely, it's going to take a long time for all of that stuff to burn. However, if it's a very neat and tidy room where there's a lot of room for the oxygen to flow, that room might burn much faster. Not encouraging anybody to have a room full of a lot of stuff, because that's still a lot of fuel that fire can burn. That can burn for a long period of time. So if you look, the one where the straw bale on the left that was kind of started to be pulled apart, where there was a lot of room for that oxygen to flow, you can see that it got hot very, very, very fast. But then so as soon as that burnt out, it eventually would cool off quickly. The one that's very dense on the right, it still burned, and it was hotter eventually than the other one, but it took a much longer period of time to burn. We talk a lot about different types of lumber. If you look at it, very similar to that diversion with the straw bale on the last one, the older lumber like this and the older construction in the homes, they're using older trees. They're very dense. You can see just in the rings of the trees alone in the lumber compared to the new stuff. Eventually, all of these will open up and start to expand where oxygen can get in. These are going to expand much more quickly because of the size of the dimension of the opening in here as well. So the newer, this is one of the reasons they talk about new construction or newer homes burning much, much faster. This and I think we'll touch on later different types of materials that are being used, but even newer types of lumber make a big difference in the homes. Again, going back to different types of fuel arrangement, this is similar to the video we watched with the straw bales, but these are set up very different. You'll see one of these is set up where the fire is going to burn upwards, and one where the fire is going to burn outwards. So the one on the left did not have a cap on the top of it where for the oxygen to flow upwards. On the right, you can see everything is stacked horizontally. So the oxygen has to come from a flow on the side. We know that fire likes to burn upwards, so it has to work its way. On the right, it would have to work its way outwards before it can work upwards. The one on the left had all the oxygen flowing upwards, where the heat's going to go as well. So as you're going to a building that that's been impacted by fire, that you're going to work at putting the fire out, understand what's in there, and if for this case, if stuff is stacked upwards or if it's stacked outwards, will make a difference on where that fire is going to go and how hot it might be initially compared. These are both sped up quite a bit, you can see by the time, but they still get very hot very quickly. We talk about this in our fire department about how long it takes us to get to the fire. I mean, this is only approximately 7 minutes in, and there's not a lot of fuel load. So if we're only 7 minutes into the fire, a lot happens in that 7 minutes as well. So we have to understand where we are at in that fire process and how long it's been burning, so we know what our strategies are going to be in fighting that fire. We may have to do a lot more firefighting on the one on the right that doesn't get as hot as fast. The other thing we're talking about with the fire triangle is how much ventilation, how much oxygen. All right, so I'm going back to the video of they're inside this is a training fire where they're inside of a box that's built for training. And so when they initially have the fire burning, the door is open, so the oxygen is being introduced. And so even just closing the door, they close the door at this point. We can watch what happens. So the thermal imaging camera is looking low to start here. As we look upwards, We're looking well over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit in some of this. Once that door is closed, eventually that oxygen is going to start to burn off in there. You see the firefighters laying down. It's probably getting pretty hot in there at this point. So 20 seconds later, the temps are already dropping significantly. So another tactic we can use during firefighting is to close the door behind us or ensure that they are. I don't know how much public education you do, and maybe Jose can touch on this at some point about if you, we show pictures of when people sleep with their doors closed. So if there is a fire in their home, this can help protect them significantly. The doors reopen now in this video, and we can watch what happens when that door opens back up. We're reintroducing the oxygen in there, so we're introducing another part to complete that fire triangle. And we're back to around 1100 degrees, again, within less than 20 seconds. So as we're thinking about that, we can make a difference for ourselves of closing the door of the home. If we're going into a home to do firefighting operations, we can control that door going in to control some of the oxygen flow that is going in there as well when we're firefighting. So fire dynamics, this is just understanding kind of the fire chemistry. We have different types of fuel in this video. So we know that these products burn at different rates. And so once this Christmas tree here starts, we know that heat, and you can see, you'll be able to see fairly soon between the couches and the chair that heat is going to create a chemical reaction, and eventually this chair right here is smoking, as you can see now. And what we talked about earlier with smoke being fuel, as soon as this fire can impact, this one is doing the same thing. These aren't impacted by fire yet. These are impacted by heat and the chemical reaction of whatever product that is creating smoke. And now the smoke is ignited on both. And you can see the carpet starting to smoke a little bit. It's the same thing. It's a synthetic material. As that starts to smoke, the fire will ignite that as well. So in less than a minute, that room is not survivable any longer. I'm going to guess there's a significant amount of oxygen flow in this room too, just based on how you can see the fire moving. So it's a couple different types. You saw that heat was impacting the chair and the couch in there. That heat is radiating down on those. So that's going to be one of the things that starts the fire to us. That's where we feel heat coming from as firefighters. Another one is as the air moves. If we have that front door open, we're going to have a airflow that comes in, but as that fire burns, it's going to have to go somewhere. So as one of the reasons we preach crawling as firefighters is that that airflow is going to come and go right over our head. This is extremely hot products of the fire that needs to go somewhere. Another one is the stuff you're touching. We're crawling because we know this is the coolest part of the room. But as we're touching things, the fire has impacted that. There's going to be heat the closer we get to the fire as well. Heat flux doesn't mean a whole lot to us, except for the fact that our gear is based on what heat flux does. So you have to understand kind of what the limitations are for your gear. Our gear can't protect us in every fire, and it's not meant to. It's meant to help us get to a point that we can put the fire out or just protect ourselves. Our face piece here, we talked about is our weakest link in our fire gear. It starts to soften at 250 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not very hot. The plastic is going to start separating at some point as well. So going back to what we talked about in the beginning is understanding what you're trying to accomplish in that fire. If it's this hot, we know that there's not a survivability for somebody inside that fire, so we might not be inside that fire. We may be fighting it from the outside or a little further away than what we had planned, because we need to protect ourselves as well. So understanding what the limit is, what your limitations are for your equipment. You can see the different temperatures on the right of how it affects your equipment. Even with the equipment on, we can still get burned. It's still going to be hotter than what our body can handle. So again, we need to understand where where the limitation is and how that can protect us. Getting into dynamics a little bit, and this is very specific to the US, but I think some of this can be relatable to a lot of what you're looking at in Kenya as well. Our homes are getting much, much bigger. And not just getting bigger, they have bigger open spaces inside of them. And so there's a lot of oxygen in these spaces compared to the smaller homes that you can compartmentalize. You can close doors to some of these rooms. These rooms are going to run out of oxygen much sooner than this large one on the bottom here. And then the amount of stuff that people have in their homes has changed. I don't know what it looks like in some of the houses that you see, but people put a lot of stuff in their homes, and they're putting a lot of stuff, the newer stuff that they make is plastic, and the different types of fuels that go in there. Both of these are stuff that was inside that home. If they took everything outside of the home, that's what's in there. That's the stuff they can burn, and it can burn for a long period of time. This one shows a little bit about different types of material from different eras. So older material, is made with, more of the, when we looked at even the pieces of lumber earlier, that piece of lumber that's from an older tree is going to take much longer to burn than the newer one. And this should show kind of the difference. The one on the left is going to be a lot of stuff made from wood, probably like a cotton cloth on the drapes, cotton and wool in the couch. The one on the right is a lot of the synthetic materials. There's plastics. There's the polystyrene, like we saw earlier, was used often for for cushions in the couch. So knowing how long those kind of materials can take to burn, that's going to be a strategy that we have to take into account for our firefighters and for our own protection as well. So protecting ourselves with our equipment based on what kind of materials are in there is important too. The one on the right with the new stuff flashed over in 3 minutes. That's probably before we even get there. That fire is going to look very different by the time we get there, and that will determine how we're going to fight that fire. The one on the left, however, is 29 minutes. We may be able to go in and make a difference there, and if anybody is inside, there might be some survivability in different rooms. So new reality, there's some of the injuries that happen, especially with heat in some of the working fires now. We say back in the day, back in the 70s, it was 1.8 deaths per 100,000. This is in the United States. But that shows that the fires then weren't burning as hot. Our strategies have also changed, so we take that into account. But fires are burning hot. We're trying to fight fires with the same strategies we fought in the 70s that we are in the 2000s, and that doesn't work based on the type of fires and the type of fire load that we have. So what can we do to kind of help ourselves? One of the things that we're getting a lot of new firefighters, so a lot less experience, but we can do a lot more with the training and education. The resources I showed you earlier from UL or any of the others that you can do the free training on, that stuff wasn't available back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. This stuff is at our fingertips now, and we can learn a lot with a lot of the good sciences out there. Looking at what fires look like if there's less fuel in them. Look at this one. This is in 5 times speed. There's very little fuel in this room. Where if this room is full of a significant amount of fuel, it can burn hotter, again, based on how balanced that fire triangle is. One thing they like to point out in here is some of these have the less fuel they have, the fire is not going to grow very big, but it's going to grow and burn fairly hot and fairly efficient because of the amount of oxygen that's in that room. But with very little fuel, it's a fairly small fire still for us. So in that first one, with the door was wide open, and you can see what the difference will be here when they close that door. And so keep this in mind as you're firefighting inside. If you can have somebody at that door to keep it closed, they'll make a big difference on what the conditions are inside as well. So again, lit the same product, however, this time has the door closed. So the fire didn't grow very big last time based on how just the chair. The chair burned fairly quickly though because of the amount of oxygen. I saw how much the fire grew in the first one and how quickly it grew. The second one here, now this fire is running out of oxygen. And well, it did push down. The temperatures in here are going to be significantly lower than the last one as well. So again, just another tactic we can use. Water works great on every fire, but if we can make it easier and more survivable on ourselves. Now you see the firefighters open the door, and that fire is going to take off again. So looking at stages of fire development, and it really depends on, like I said, whether we have ventilation or not. Very quickly, as soon as that fire is growing, if we do have a significant amount of oxygen in there, that fire is going to grow and fully develop very quick. But as soon as it starts to run out of oxygen, we get into that decay phase. And you saw in that second video how quick it got to the point that the fire was kind of just smoldering in there, couldn't find any oxygen, so it was just kind of hanging out. And then when they open that door again, it will take off. When this fire, the one the door was open the whole time, is eventually going to burn out. It's going to run out of fuel. So a couple stages within, this is kind of, it's a similar look to the last one. It's going to grow as soon as that oxygen starts to be depleted. That fire will go out. If we never open that door, that fire is just going to keep on a path down this way. But as soon as we saw on that one, once the door opened back up, we went back to a fully developed fire, and then worked its way until the fuel started to run out. So it had plenty of oxygen and it just kept going. So one of the things is we talked about opening a door or window. We want to keep that door or window closed to help us be better protected, but we can also use it as a ventilation tactic. If we want to provide more oxygen to the fire for some reason to keep that fire in a certain area, we can do the same thing. This will show a little bit, but this video shows a little bit more on the door open or door close control. So on the left, as I talked about, is these guys are doing firefighting operations. They want to keep this door, they can bring that hose in, and the further they keep that door closed, the less oxygen they're introducing into that building. The one on the right, there's a significant amount of oxygen, and we talked a little bit about the convection earlier. That airflow is going to flow into those firefighters and back out even before that fire gets there. This one doesn't have the airflow. So as the firefighters are in here, they're in a box that doesn't have the air moving around them. And that's the heat that can also damage more property and hurt firefighters too. So controlling that door for firefighters is extremely important. As you can see, this took a long time for it to develop, kind of like those charts we were looking at. So right here, that fire is kind of getting into that decay phase. It's running out of oxygen. This one, however, just took off. And so this shows an example of not controlling the door. They're going to start ventilating the apartment right away. And you can see how fast this fire is going to grow. You see they already broke out a window, so now they have no control over how much oxygen is going in there. This is going to have to change what their entire tactics are for the fire. But now they're fighting a fire that got very hot very fast. So as you can see, this is not a safe environment for firefighters in this one in particular, just because of how much fire is coming up. But a lot of that has to do with the fact they can't control this door and they can't control that window any further. So as we think about this, as we're ventilating any roofs or forcible entry, we need to be able to create a way to control that door. As soon as you may force the door open in a building that's on fire, remember what you're doing. You're introducing that oxygen, and whether or not we can keep that door controlled or not is going to make a difference for us as firefighters. Another thing we talked about is exterior water application and how much of a difference that can make as well. You saw some of those fires that are burning pretty well, and the difference we can make by putting water in from the outside in this case. So that fire is already ventilated through this window. This window wasn't controlled, so there's a lot of oxygen in there. So now we can take some of the heat out, and heat was another one of our points of our fire triangle. Once we start taking some of the heat out, it's going to make a difference inside as well. You might just be putting water inside from our path of least resistance. In this case, it was an open window. So we know as firefighters, we want to put water on the fire, and we want to do that as quickly and as safely as possible. And the last one we saw, they used the front window. It may just be from the front door. We may have to go in and get toward the fire, but as soon as we can start taking some of that heat out, we make it more survivable for the victims and for ourselves. And as we say, as safely as possible. You saw that how much of a difference it made when they put water from the exterior in that last house in that open window. And that's gonna be our safest place to be from. We don't need to worry about our gear, but if the fire is directly in that window that we can get to, it's much quicker to get there anyways than going in the house and around three corners to get to that room that has a opening from the outside. Remember, and again, this is a house from the US here. Remember, as you're looking at the homes, that just because there's a front door here does not mean that that might be your closest door to the fire. The further you have to get into this house, the more danger you can put yourself in. You can see we also have fire coming from the back. This smoke here looks a little bit lighter and doesn't look like it's moving as much as the one in the back, which might tell us the fire is going to be back here. And that might be, like we said earlier, the closer we can get to the fire, the better. In this case, the fire is right here. So if we go in that front door, we need to go down in the door and down the stairs. That takes a lot longer, where we can walk around here and the fire is directly right there for us. Same on this one as well. You can look at, based on looking at this house, we can see that the fire is likely burning on the back side. So going in the front door, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us when we can, this should show a rear picture. We have the fire right here. We can go to the fire from our safest route possible. The quickest way to get there might be from the exterior. We saw in this last one, I think we could all agree that the fastest and easiest way would be to come right here and put water on this fire. Same thing here. There's no point in going in the front door when we have the fire right here for us. The other thing that helps us is as soon as water is converted to steam inside, that water expands at a very high rate. See, this firefighter is going to put water from the exterior of this home. So instead of going in the front door and getting to that room, he's doing it directly from where he can find the fire. We talked earlier about what difference it makes. This is the same fire. We talked about door control. As soon as they open the door that introduced oxygen to this spot, this fire in this compartment right here was oxygen limited. So as soon as they opened the door, there was a significant amount of oxygen, and this is what happened. So understand what's behind that door, and it might be peeking behind the door. It might be looking at the door with a thermal imager if you have one, or feeling the door to see how hot it is in that compartment behind it prior to opening it. I talked a little bit about trying to control the door for firefighters as you're doing fire operations inside. You see this one, they've tried to control the door. This one, they have a firefighter at the outside. These two both controlling the door and making sure the door can stay as closed as possible so there's less oxygen inside, and we can help our firefighters survive inside. Talking about getting water on the fire ASAP. If we do have to go to an interior attack, the sooner we can put water on this fire. If there was a victim in the kitchen over here, well, it's great to get that victim out. The best thing we can do is put that fire out to get to that point of making it more survivable for the victim. This is going to change the smoke conditions and everything for the victim and their survivability inside. I'm going to go back to, I do want to go back to a couple videos and talk a little bit about the exterior firefighting portion. Well, we're not trying to say this replaces interior firefighting by any means, but with all of the stuff we looked at of how heat's transferred and how the oxygen is transferred in there and what difference that makes for us, this needs to be something we consider as we're fighting fire. We're fighting fire at the closest spot we can to the fire, and that might be here. And the reason we're doing that is it helps protect ourselves. We've got in the habit of our idea, if we have fire coming out of this window here, we've all got in the habit of going in and getting the fire because we go in and get fire, right? But if we have fire right here, it's no different than the fire being right inside the front door. Let's put that fire out and make the whole area more survivable for everybody else. We know that, as you saw, as soon as we take one of the elements out, whether it's oxygen or fuel, the heat goes down dramatically. So if we have somebody in a room that we could make more survivable by taking out some of the heat, that's our biggest goal here. So as soon as we can impact this fire, then we can do the search and rescue for the rest. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be every time, but we need to be smart and understand how those fire dynamics can change that room or even hurt us, and fight fire hopefully a little bit smarter. Hopefully this presentation has helped a little bit make people feel like they can fight fire a little bit smarter than they did before. So that's all I have, Jose. I'm going to turn it back over to you before my internet doesn't like me again, and I apologize for that. I appreciate everyone's patience with that too.
Thanks, Jason. Truly appreciate. There's a question that is interesting. Maybe before you go, that question is asking. My request is how to consider coming up with a lesson on control and put off fire in a library. What type of PPE is in the library is required? Types of extinguishers is required in the library.
Yeah, and it does look like we literally just lost Jason again.
Okay.
So let's go into that question. I think we can have a group discussion about that. We've got lots of people who can help with that conversation. Before we do that, let me just go ahead and formally close the official training here. And just thank everyone for attending today.